welcome Console Room to the Douglas Adams Fan Panel.
Don't applaud yet. You may regret it.
Good evening. Just a quick round of introductions. I'm Alex Seymour. I'll be the moderator tonight. And you know that a convention is getting a bit long in the tooth when we begin to celebrate the script editor for the 17th season, Douglas Adams. But let's start off by introducing everyone. I came into Doctor Who at the Fourth Doctor, and didn't know that Douglas Adams was doing the script writing back then, but I certainly did love season 17. And to my right is Don.
I'm Don Kaiser. I came into Douglas Adams. A friend of mine brought over to my house an LP record. And he said, "You have to listen to this." And it was an LP of the first part of the radio show of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So they actually did an LP. It got all the way through basically the great engineering tunnels of Magma Field, and that's where it ended. And I said, "Can't end here. I need to know more about what's going on." Anyway, so that was my introduction to the Douglas Adams. It was an LP of Hitchhiker's Guide.
And we'll come back to that, but that's how you got the script editor job. And to my left.
Hi, my name is Mike Rogers. Like everyone else, lifelong Doctor Who fan. I think I picked up on first run of Tom Baker in 1982 on PBS, perhaps like many other folks here, and was hooked very quickly after that. I think Hitchhiker's Guide came into focus right around that same time on PBS, and so yeah, I'm just delighted to be here and to be able to talk about a creative person like Douglas Adams. And season 17 is also another one that I really particularly love too. So glad to be here today.
And lastly, from the ether.
Hi, I'm Chris Bond. I feel like I'm auditioning for the role of the computer in Red Dwarf right now. I'm a lifelong Doctor Who fan as well. And Douglas Adams, I first became a fan of his when the TV show came out back in, I can't remember the exact year now, but it must have been 85 or so. I'm sure one of you guys can.
The first TV show.
The first TV show,
Yeah, the TV show was, I think, in 1981, but it might have been 85 when you saw it, though, too.
That's possible, yeah. Although I feel like it was probably closer to 81. Mm-hmm. I actually had the chance to interview Douglas Adams. This is probably 20 years ago now when I was in college. And he was he was great. He was wonderful to talk to, gave me a lot of time, and was really just wonderful to talk to, yeah.
Okay, so let's just remind everyone how DNA got his start. And the answer was very slowly. He was unemployed after he got out of college. He was sort of struggling. He was a bodyguard for a oil prince at one point. He is one of the few people to have actually contributed to the Monty Python Flying Circus without ever being one of the core cast. And, but I mean, he was underemployed, had to move in back with his mom. And then he wrote the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a radio show. And that took off like hotcakes.
I believe the radio show was 1978, if I have my nerd facts straight in my head. At least the first series.
The first series.
Yes, yep. Yeah, and you're right, then it just kind of blew up from there. And of course, Doctor Who kind of came into view right around that same time for him. And so things really kind of rapidly accelerated for him, I think.
Well, before he got the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he submitted a script about an ark full of idiots floating in space. But the ark in space had just been done, so the BBC said no. He would, of course, later reuse that idea. He loved to reuse ideas.
No, no, go ahead. Let me ask you up here. Obviously he's written novels about Hitchhiker's Guide. He's written the radio plays 1, 2, 3, and 4. He's the series, I should say. More,
Yep.
more, there's the TV version, things like that. What's your favorite?
Gosh, for me, it wasn't my first one. My first
But I mean,
Hitchhiker's...
of the 3 genres, the TV shows, the radio plays, or the novel.
For me, the radio play or radio plays are the pinnacle for me. They weren't the first thing I saw. I started it with the TV series, but then on public radio, they started playing that, and it just captivated me and blew me away. The creativity and then I think the books came pretty rapidly right around that same time too.
Yeah. Alex?
For me, it was the books, then the TV series, then maybe the movie, and then maybe at the bottom of the pile comes the radio. But
Save the best for last.
Well, he didn't care. I know he didn't care for it. I don't know.
No, I think the critical fault on my part was that instead of listening to LP, I tried listening to it on the highway as I was driving hither to yon, and the dialogue with the special effects does not mix well with road noise. So no to those who have not done the radio play yet. Don't do it in the car.
It definitely demands your attention, yeah.
What about you? What was your favorite of the other genres?
I think I lean toward the books, and then the TV show, and then the radio plays, and then the movies. And I could think the reason for that is because I think Adams himself had the most control over the books. The radio plays, I mean, he wrote all of it himself, except for obviously the movies, because he had passed away by that time. But I think the books, he had a little more time and a little bit more space to craft the things that he wanted to do. The radio plays, he was under an incredible time crunch. And he was actually, in some cases, toward the second series, writing the scripts as they were being recorded. Like he would be writing scene 3 while they were recording scene 2.
Here are a few more pages.
Yeah. So if the radio plays aren't maybe the most solid, that's really the reason why. Now, he had a very good reason for that, which is he was writing the second series of the radio plays, going into at least pre-production on the TV show, and writing script editing the Doctor Who season, which is why we're even talking about him, pretty much all at the same time.
Right.
Which is, I mean, any one of those would, require pretty much your full attention to really do really well at it.
See, I'm a radio play person too. I just that is my. I have bought all the DVDs, and there's these big huge box set of DVDs, right? And I listen to them over and over again because I just they are so funny, and I mean, and it may be that I didn't like the TV series at all. I thought it was it just like it didn't hit for me. It's just like, oh God,
Well, I think you can do so much more with radio because you don't have those visual limitations and budget limitations.
Yes.
And I think, you can really tell from the TV series just how little money they really had to be able to pour into that
Yes.
to make it look good.
I just realized something. We missed something. Where do you put the computer game in the hierarchy?
I was thinking that, but I was like, oh, we're on a tangent. I still, and I'm kicking myself, I should have brought it here. I still have the Commodore 64 Infocom Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy computer game.
For those who don't know, Infocom put out a bunch of text-only games.
Yes, early on.
Early on, they were at the very front of, like Commodore 64.
Yep.
Leather Goddess of Phobos is another one.
Yep.
I personally rank the computer games fairly high, even though they were extraordinarily difficult.
Yes, extraordinarily difficult. Because
Just-
you'd have to type in stand up.
Right,
You know, and there were no clues, and no internet to like go and find out, what am I supposed to do? And so you'd have to so you're playing Arthur Dent, and you wake up in the dark, and you have to like fumble around and figure out how to turn on the lights, and then eventually you'll see the bulldozer out front, and then have to make some decisions. But the packaging was so cool, because I remember they had crazy stuff like a bag of fluff, all of these additional sundry items that came with the computer game. And Jujanta 5000 whatever super sensitive sunglasses that turn instantly dark if you're ever faced with danger. And they just had a pair of black like cardboard sunglasses you could put on over your face.
And I do remember the text games, and they were pretty interesting, But I'm not a big video gamer,
Yeah.
And you can find them still online, living on the internet. So,
Really?
yes.
It's so cool.
But,
It's really worth mentioning too, Adams was really an early exponent of video games.
Yes,
He loved the promise of them, and he was, I think, years ahead of his time in, trying to do something with the format.
But again, like I said, I'm a big fan of the radio plays. I do love the books as well. And I mean, part of my issue with the books is just a personal thing. In that I'm a really slow reader. And so for me, just because I'm such a slow reader, the pacing of the radio plays for me made them so much funnier, And there's just when the whale appears in the sky and hey, what's this? I think I'll call it my tail. Yes, tail. And just and he had a great cast.
Yes.
Obviously
Great
for
voice
his,
actors.
very good actors for the radio plays, and so again that's just personal thing. Speaking of video games, I'm going to get off a tangent just a tiny bit. Starship Titanic. Have either of you played the game?
I know of it.
Oh God, it was a fun game. much later than the text games, mind you, but it was amazing game.
So DNA was the creative consultant behind the game.
Yes. Oh yeah. It was. He was actually no. Douglas wrote the game. He wrote the game. The book was written by Eric Idle. Because what it was is Douglas asked Eric to write the book, and Eric said, I would only write it if I can write it naked. And so Douglas said, fine, okay. No, Douglas wrote the game. He wrote the game, and then Eric did the novelization, basically, of the game.
Oh, just a little bit off tangent. If no one has read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and you want just a little taste, go out and find the song Marvin, I Love You. Strictly not DNA, but it will give you a good 3-minute taste of what you're going to be getting into.
I'm so bored. Brain the size of a planet. Go get the aliens, they said.
And one of the beauties, like how this all kind of twists together. So Douglas does the first series, Fit the First, around 1978. As Chris pointed out, under tremendous pressure, cranks out a second series, which I think I've read he wasn't entirely happy with the results of. And then the radio series kind of quits there, but he continues writing books. And so his first 2 books kind of retrace a lot of what you hear in the radio series. The third book is like kind of a rewrite of some of that, Life, the Universe, and Everything. Years and years later, after Douglas Adams had died, a group came together and brought the original cast back and adapted some of his later books as radio plays. And to my liking, they're brilliant. Like they're very authentic to that same kind of feel. Like they had to replace a few of the voice actors because they had, died in the years between those two. But if you ever have a chance to get the tertiary phase or beyond, there really are like, you think, 20 years later, it's not going to be as good. Douglas isn't there to write it, but really,
They're
wonderful.
amazing. They're very funny.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, I should mention that Douglas Adams is not a writer. I will quote from Douglas Adams, "I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they fly by." In order to get the third book out, the editor had to kidnap him and hold him hostage in a hotel for 3 weeks to get him to complete because he had already passed so many deadlines. Yeah.
And that wasn't the only time something like that happened either. That's one reason that Shada turned out to be in the form that it is, because he had a different idea that the producer of the show had rejected, but he kept pitching it anyway, trying to get that going. The producer kept saying, no, I told you, I don't want this. I don't want this. Do something else. Do something else. And like 3 days before the script was actually due, he realized, well, now I really have to write something else. So he cranked out Shada instead.
Again, just a real quick thing. The Starship Titanic, he has one of the voice actors is John Cleese, and the part that he plays is he plays this self-destruct, right? And you know, as you're going through the whole thing, right? If you set it off, right, you hear John Cleese is going, "You set off the self-destruct, very good, 1,000, 999, 998," and basically you have to keep going back to the room periodically and pound it. Says, now I've lost track. 1,998. You have to keep going back to get him to reset, otherwise it'll blow up. But anyway, yeah. And again, I was pretty disappointed, you know, in the movie as well. You know, I mean, it just because for me, like you say, seeing it was not the same as reading it or hearing it. It lost, for me, it lost something in translation. And even though, yes, the movie productions was much slicker and all that stuff, it wasn't the TV production, right? But it still lost something in translation for me. And I don't know, you know.
There are some, for my liking, I see where you come from, and I do agree, like the movie just isn't quite there, but there are some really delightful parts to it. I really enjoy the way they did the graphics of the book in the movie, and I love Stephen Fry doing
Stephen
the
Fry
voice.
As Marvin was oh God. Well, you know, he can do no wrong as far as I'm concerned, but yes.
and so, you know, I love the way the Vogons were realized in the movie, and their spaceships as giant office buildings. And to me, it gave me the strongest sense of really, I think what Douglas really meant with the Vogons was just this crushing bureaucracy. And so there are aspects of it that I really appreciate and enjoy. And then other parts you're like, you know. And how do you cram all of that into a 2-hour film anyway?
Right.
It's pretty challenging.
So anyway, we have a mostly unemployed DNA. He does a radio play. It goes off like gangbusters. Doctor Who is bereft of a scriptwriter. And they say, hey, hot new thing, do you want to be the scriptwriter? And he's got the second season of Hitchhiker's Guide coming up. He's got a lot of stuff on his plate. But what does this underemployed person who deeply loves Doctor Who say when he's offered the job as a scriptwriter?
Yes.
Yes.
Of course I'll do it. What could possibly go wrong? Do you think he said that too?
So let's see. This was written in the late 70s. High inflation. The BBC was under a certain amount of economic strain. So yeah, let's throw a untested person into being a scriptwriter. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I think there are lots of key elements to being a scriptwriter. Being a good writer is one of those, and I would put Douglas Adams in that kind of category. He's an incredibly creative, witty person, but a script editor also has to know how to craft a script so that it fits within a budget, and what's possible, what's not, and be able to work to deadlines and do rewrites, and I think those probably were muscles that he hadn't acquired yet at that point, and so.
Or would ever acquire.
Well, yeah. And you can tell season 17 was cheaply made. Like it visually looks like they're stretching their budget beyond the capabilities. And kudos to them for what they did achieve and what they were trying to do. So, don't get me wrong, I love season 17, but it definitely creaks a bit in terms of the budget and how well. Oh, thank you. Yes, that's very good. So the stories that involve season 17 would be Destiny of the Daleks, which would see the return of Davros and the Movellans. And then that's followed by The City of Death, which, of course, he helped to co-write with the producer, which I think most people consider to be a stone-cold classic. I certainly would put it that way, where they travel to Paris. The third story would be The Creature from the Pit, which some people kind of cringe at. Again, I'm vastly in love with that story. Nightmare of Eden, which involves like drugs, Fraxoan. And then The Horns of Naimon with Graham Crowden. And then,
Which what?
Yeah, oh, yeah, there you go. You can see there's Scaroth from The City of Death. And then, of course, the penultimate...
Sorry, what did you say about the Horns of Naimon?
Oh, just that it has Graham Crowden in it. Saldeed,
Oh, yeah.
the main bad guy. Just a delightful actor. Very hammy, very over the top. And season 17 is full of over-the-top acting. And Tom Baker, of course, leading the charge on that. And then, of course, you get to the penultimate finale, Shada, written again by Douglas Adams, which, of course, I think as fans we all probably know at this point, does not get completed. Partially filmed, strike at the BBC, scuttled that, and they were never able to remount and finish the recordings. And so it kind of laid languishing in the archives for years. A small snippet was used in The Five Doctors when Tom Baker did not elect to return. Until
And now they've completed it 7 times.
Yeah, well, and the whole Shada journey is crazy because in the early 90s, they released the extant pieces with Tom Baker kind of narrating what happened in between, which was, as a fan, wonderful to see. And then many years later, with the DVD release, they kind of re-put that out, and everyone was clamoring at the time saying, oh, you should do something like animating it. And I think Ian Levine had probably actually done that by that point, but they didn't release it that way. And then a few years later, the BBC did do their own animation of the missing scenes. And then, of course, on this new latest Blu-ray set, which I believe will be getting a US release in the next month or two, as I understand it. It's out in the UK as of December. Then they actually have that there, and episodically too.
Except that
Yeah.
for all those that you've mentioned, it was completed as Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency.
Yep, absolutely.
Which I've written down when you talk about that. Yes.
There's so many ideas that Douglas would take and then retool and put into other areas. Professor Chronotis being a big one with, I believe, Dirk Gently. The whole idea of Life, the Universe, and Everything, his third novel. He has The Cricket Men, which was actually an idea he had pitched for Doctor Who, which then a number of years later, someone has novelized his original idea. And so you can pick up Doctor Who and The Cricket Men as that initial concept of what that would have been as a Doctor Who adventure.
Or read the third book.
Yeah, or just read the third book, yeah.
So you mentioned Dirk Gently. Let's talk about Dirk Gently. 2 novels.
Actually, before that, I want to just go back a little bit to the third book, just so people can get an idea of, second book, just so they can get an idea of DNA's humor. So we've got the restaurant at the end of the universe. In it, the protagonist...
Milliways.
Yes, who serve the Amygdalian major cow, which in the TV is played by Peter Davison, the 5th Doctor. The heroine is played by, who is it? Sandra Dickinson, who, as we all know, is the mother-in-law of David Tennant. I'll let you guys pick it apart. Now, do we have any people here or vegetarians or vegans because of philosophical issues? So
And if you were inclined that way, you would actually, I think, love this bit, because he does kind of point out the ethical issues of eating meat. It's brilliantly funny, but I'll let you tell it.
So the point of the vignette is that the cow is sentient. He fully knows that he's a cow, but he's been bred to want to be eaten. He really wants to be eaten with a little bit of wine sauce.
May I interest you in parts of my body, I believe is the line.
I believe it's the shoulder. Yes, there's parts of the shoulder. And so you are actually causing offense if you do not eat him. It's that brilliant British inversion of logic. It is strictly logical. If it is unethical to eat animals because you are violating the life, what about an animal where, yes,
That wants to be
eaten, yes, and that is the absurdist logic that just runs through him, which I guess would take us to Dirk Gently's detective agency.
Well, you know, sorry, I'm just going to continue on
Yeah.
Millway for just a moment. You know, I mean, where they reintroduce Marvin again, right? So what have you been doing all the 2,000 years, Marvin? Parking cars. You know, it's little things like that where, like I say, he brings back these things, right? You know, and you're like, oh God, Marvin has been parking cars for whatever, you know, 10,000 years, thousands of years. So yes, Dirk Gently. You know, there were 2 novels.
And 2 TV series.
I'll get to the TV series. Novels first. The novels were written were while he was still alive, and the TV series were much, much later. But yeah, you know, the idea of this, if you haven't read the Holistic Detection Agency, Dirk Gently his whole shtick is everything comes together, right? And he's kind of the focal point of things coming together in his cases. Am I getting that right, or?
So the best line, the best thing summarizes it, is that he firmly believes in Zen driving, where the point of Zen driving is that you pick a car that looks like it knows where it's going, and you follow it. And you may not get to where you want to go, but you do go where you should be going.
Where you need to be,
Yeah.
yes,
You need to be going, yes.
yes.
And so a holistic detective is someone who doesn't, let's say he's assigned to investigate a murder. He deliberately doesn't investigate the murder, but goes off in a completely different direction, figuring that the universe is going to wind its way back to where it needs to be in the first place.
Right.
And of course, that's what happens in the books. It always somehow, even though he doesn't expect it to, or doesn't understand how it's going to, works.
He always ends up, yes,
That's-
he always ends up where he needs to be at a particular point. Yes. And then, yes, as you mentioned, Alex, there were 2 TV series written not too long ago. You know, I mean, well, relative to the books. But I mean, you know.
One was, what, 15 years ago, and the other one was about 5?
Yeah, about 5, yeah.
So how faithful do you feel like they were to his original novels?
In spirit, I thought the first series was. There was a lot of differences, but if you're doing like a 6-part series, you keep with the spirit of the books. I thought there was well enough. The second series, we are in the golden age of television, and I have not gotten around.
Too many other things to stream right now, right?
Too many other things.
I hear you.
The,
I've seen it. It definitely diverges from Adams's ideas almost immediately, but I do think that it's pretty funny in its own right.
yes,
And I think
very funny.
it captures the spirit of what he was trying to do pretty well. I would recommend it. I don't know that it's necessarily ultra Douglas Adamsy, but I did enjoy it.
Yeah, I like you. I really enjoyed both series. There's some very funny characters and things that pop back up and things like that. And the situation, you know, I agree. The story may not, but the situations that the characters got themselves into, I think, are Douglas Adamsy. You know. They're in the jail and you know they can't keep her, and she gets walked out of the jail and just starts talking to the other person in the other cell. You can get out of the jail? Well, why didn't you? You know, I didn't want to. You know, whatever. You know, there are some very funny situations in the series, and it's I thought they were very well done.
You're talking about the holistic assassin.
Yes.
It's a great concept, and I don't know if Douglas came up with anything close to that himself, but it really fits into the spirit of the Dirk Gently universe.
Well, that's what I meant. Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She really, her deal is that she isn't hired by anyone to assassinate people. She just knows that she has to do something and goes ahead and does it, and functions in much the same way that Dirk does.
Yeah.
Where just seemingly random coincidence will happen upon her, and she'll do something different. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's very cleverly done.
Yes.
I think it's cool when other creatives are able to kind of come in and emulate Douglas's style of humor so effortlessly that you kind of squint and you go, did he write that or did someone else? Like in the movie version, I love on Vogue Sphere where these things come out and slap you in the face if you have a thought. Like that feels so Douglas Adams-ish. And I don't know, perhaps he actually inserted that, as part of an early script draft before his death. I don't know. But it just seems so very much like Douglas Adams. And I love moments like that when people are able to take his work, adapt it, and emulate that kind of humor.
So, Mike, you might appreciate the story. Just talking about who DNA was as a person, you said that you had a chance to interview him and he was very generous. When was it? It was, 83. In 83, Penthouse sent a 22-year-old journalist over to him to interview him. The journalist was Neil Gaiman, who at that point was a journalist. They talked, they hung out. Gaiman wrote the Penthouse article. He stayed on and proceeded to write a book called Don't Panic, because DNA was just very generous at the time. And then Good Omens sort of sprung up from, DNA was sort of the godfather of encouraging Neil Gaiman to go ahead and write Good Omens, which is once again, very much in the Douglas Adams. Now, that being said, this is way off topic, but I think the Amazon Prime TV series Good Omens diverges from that DNA outlook. It is something much more serious. But the book, Good Omens itself, very much in DNA. So he inspired a lot of people.
Do you, I'm going to go back to Hitchhikers again for a moment. Do you have a favorite bit?
Gosh, a ton of favorite bits.
Yeah, I know. But if you had to pick just one.
I do love, and I can't think of the alien's name, but the alien at the beginning of Life, the Universe, and Everything, who's on a quest. He's, I believe, eternal or immortal. And so he's decided he's going to go and insult every single living being in the universe. And he's going alphabetically through the list.
Yes.
And so he lands on Earth with Arthur trapped on prehistoric Earth and steps out. And Arthur thinks he's been saved. And he's so thrilled. And this alien just walks out and says, "You're a total jerk." And turns and goes back in the spaceship and takes off again. Just little bits like that I just find delightful and funny. And I love the twist.
How about you, Alex?
So I'll tell you about my second favorite one.
Okay.
And that is, we know that the answer to the life, the universe, and everything,
42.
42. And we know that the question is 6 times 9.
Yeah.
6 times 9 equals 42, which is, as everyone knows, correct. Because if 6 times 9 in base 13 certainly does equal 42. And DNA said, no, that was not the point. I do not do multiplication in base 13. So that's my second favorite bit.
How about you, Chris?
I think the whole character of Marvin, just in general, is, I think there's a lot of Douglas in Marvin for sure. And as a character, he really resonated with me for a long time.
My favorite bit is the bit with the 2 missiles, that are coming at them, right? and they turn on the infinite improbability drive, and suddenly the one missile was this very surprised sperm whale, and it.
Hey, don't forget the bowl of petunias. They're important too.
I'm getting to that.
Okay, all right.
Very surprised sperm whale, who had only about a few moments of life before it had to deal with not being a sperm whale anymore. And the only thing that went through the bowl of Petunia's mind was, "Oh no, not again," which the first time you hear that in any of the books or the radio play or the TV, right, you're like, I don't get that. But of course, it comes back. You find out why the bowl of Petunia says, "Oh no, not again," because it's Azgrak, something like that, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The person he keeps accidentally killing.
Yes,
over
yes,
and over.
because over and over again in the
Hyperjack.
books and in the radio
Yes.
plays, this poor guy, he keeps getting killed by Dent, right? Over and over and over again, and so that little bit, "Oh no, not again," and you're like, but like you say, Douglas brought that back, right? So he killed him again, and he killed him again, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, that's why the bowl near Petunia said, "Oh no, not again."
And he would
And
have.
you
he
know,
would have,
the guy who was insulting Arthur Dent, there's a callback to that later on. I'm not even sure if it's in the same novel, but it's millions of years later, and he comes back and he shows up in the background, insults somebody else, and he's still alphabetically
Right.
very close to Arthur. So he's gone millions of years, and he's still
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
ARTU.
I believe it's they jump forward in time to present day Earth, and there's this cricket match, and the cricket men are blowing things up, and people are lying there dying, and the alien walks up to this man who's been shot, and he's like in pain, and goes and insults him too. And you're right, millions of years have passed, and he's barely gotten through the D's.
Yeah.
But there's lots of very funny little bits. Like I say, the whole, I've been parking cars, the millways and so long thanks for all the fish, they thought, somebody thought it was a very clever, triple backflip, through the hoop, when it really was so long and thanks for all the fish. It's just little stuff like that makes the writing is just so funny.
Well, and I think that's what makes season 17 so special in my eyes, is you can see Douglas's humor popping in. Now, some folks, your mileage may vary, right? Some folks talk about how annoying that is, and I could see their point. But to me, it's just I love that little delightful little things, like he's trapped in the pit and he's hanging from this cliff, and so he's like pulls out a book about how to climb the Himalayas in 10 easy steps, and it's in Tibetan. So then he pulls out a second book, how to read Tibetan, and you know that's Douglas's writing right there.
So the flip side, if you're looking like a negative, is like the regeneration of Romana 2.
Yep.
There is no graceful way to handle it. The actress of Ramona 1 said, "Nope, we're not going to do this." They grabbed the actress from the prior season and recast. Just like I said, there's no graceful way to handle this. DNA decided to handle it with humor. I like that, but at the same time, here we have this major life-changing event, and it's just handled with the lightest of a feather.
It messes with canon too, right? Can the Time Lord then decide what they look like? Because apparently Romana could, and did she burn through 3 or 4 regenerations to finally get back to the Lala Ward face that she had the first time she walked through the console room? So yeah, he would do those types of things throughout the whole season. And I don't know, would now be a good time to kind of dive into some of his Doctor Who stories and his story editing, or?
Sure.
I don't want to veer us in any kind of weird direction here. So I don't know. When you think of like City of Death, Pirate Planet, and Shada, is there a clear winner in terms of like people's preference? I know we have a lot of audience members here, so I'd be curious to hear what people think about like these 3 stories. Are there any in particular that you think really are the peak, pinnacle Douglas Adams Doctor Who stories?
Well, I like the Horns and Imon personally, but then I'm a sucker for anything having to do with Greek and Roman mythology. So,
I do like the Horns, but it's the Pirate Planet for me. And
I like the Pirate Planet too. That was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, and it's a fun one. It's not a serious one. But
Mr. God, what's he kept saying?
Mr. Fibuli?
Yes, Mr. Fibuli.
And Bruce Purchase does such a great job as the pirate captain in that too, kind of part cyborg, but lots of wonderful lines and so much creativity again in each of Douglas's 3 stories. There's just like there are these strange twists that you don't get with your normal typical Doctor Who writers, I think.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Alex. Go
Oh,
ahead.
no, I had-
No. You were talking about your favorite was Pirate Planet.
Yeah, no, that was it.
Is there any reason why?
It's fun.
Okay. Chris?
I think there's a lot of great ideas in all 3 of them, but I think the only one that really hangs together all the way to the end for me is City of Death. And that one, I mean, he was firing on all cylinders when he was putting that together. I think it stands, next to his Hitchhiker's work as some of his best stuff. Pirate Planet, I think, I don't want to say I don't like it or anything, but I think there were elements that didn't quite come together that kind of make the ending of the story not work for me. And Shada has some pretty obvious
Right.
flaws.
Yeah.
Shada, for all the times that they've redone it, I kind of wish they would just leave it alone and let it go, because for me, it was never really finished in the first place. Adams never had the time to put the story together and figure it out. If you go back and look at the very earliest versions, he didn't really know what to do with the ending. And a lot of the ending wasn't even filmed. So, they're really working with something that is an incomplete and unfinished and kind of unfinishable work for me.
I know in the season 17 box set, the UK version I've already watched, and in the documentary they do like a new documentary about Douglas Adams' life, and I believe it's there. It might be in the Shada Making of documentary, but it's mentioned that he himself was kind of relieved when Shada got canceled because, as you say, Chris, he wasn't entirely happy with what he had written for it and felt like it needed more time to kind of polish and get a more satisfying ending to it. So it's kind of funny how many of us, I would put myself in this category, kind of idolize that story. And maybe we elevate it higher than it should be just because it's partially finished and not completely finished. But certainly the author himself saw some limitations to it.
And it's worth noting that he left the series, almost immediately afterwards, just out of frustration with, the lack of resources. And he had very big, very grandiose ideas a lot of times. And on a TV budget, you're just not going to be able to realize that stuff, which is why he focused on novel writing for most of the rest of his life.
Well,
But he always did wanna make it
especially as you say that particular TV budget, yes.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
gosh. Season 17. Like, it's an amazing jump when you go from the Horns of Nymon to the Leisure Hive. Just what a huge leap in terms of production value. I'm not sure exactly how J&T managed to do it when Graham Williams couldn't, but it looks so much more professional and slick, and at least in those early, season 18 I think comes out strong. I think in J&T's later years things start to taper off. But yeah, you can really see that they're barely holding it together in season 17 budget-wise to be able to make the programs look decent and to get everything filmed and in the can.
Yeah, the Horns and Nymons, it looks like they're walking through some sort of like thrown together hallway or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just the maze was just like. Yeah, it really wasn't. But again, I did like the story.
But well, yeah, and of course, I mean, if we were all into big flashy budgety things, we wouldn't be Doctor Who fans, right?
Yeah.
I think we all
That's true.
recognize a great story is a great story, even if it doesn't look good on the screen. If you can see the tape holding the walls together, it doesn't matter if you're entertained by the performers, if you're enjoying the story and the ideas.
No. The reasons why we love Doctor Who is because we are poor, damaged kids who at a young age desperately searched for science fiction television, and Doctor Who was it.
Yeah.
It was hard to find good sci-fi back in the 70s. That's definitely for sure.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I've always felt, at least with classic Doctor Who, that you have to treat it as if it's like a filmed play rather than what we'd expect from television now.
Well, and I
The
think,
new series, not so much because the budgets are higher and
Yeah.
the effects are better.
to me, I think,
Yeah,
I think
much
City
higher.
of Death, probably like you, Chris, is his all-time best work. And to me, it's amazing because it was written under such time constraints. Like David Fisher originally was writing that story, and they decided it was unworkable, and so they had to start, well, not entirely from scratch, but they had to do a major rewrite. And to have that story come through so strong and well written and plotted out, I think is a huge triumph for Douglas and for, I would presume, the producer as well who helped co-write that.
So on that note, if you had to recommend one piece of DNA's work for the audience, what one piece would that be for a total newbie?
For, would it be Doctor Who or any of his stuff?
DNA, any of his stuff.
I would point them to the radio series personally. I mean, if you want true Douglas Adams, I think at his finest, it would be those first 3 series for sure of his radio plays. But it's all good. Like, I wouldn't turn people away from any of it. But if you got to start, that's where I would say start.
Second that, yeah, exactly. Again, like I say, I'm the radio play fanatic. I mean, I listen to them over and over and over again, and there are so many funny lines, and I just crack up, even though I heard it, and I know the joke's coming, right? And it doesn't matter, and maybe like. Oh, maybe you can take a skiing vacation, the mice, Benji. We're talking about Norway. Have you ever been in a place called Norway? All those little fiddly bits, It's just
The fiddly bits, the fjords. Won a major award,
I would say, well, first of all, it's worth pointing out that it's not just a difference in format between the radio series and the TV show and the books. There's actually a lot of unique material in each one.
Yes, there is
comedy
actually,
bits.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it's actually worth seeking them all out just for that.
Yes.
I would personally guide a newbie toward the books first. To me, that's where he was the strongest writer and had the clearest vision and had the most space to be funny. Because a lot of his ideas kind of needed a little space and time to develop and to really kind of flesh them out.
And while I liked the Dirk Gently books, they were just a little bit too out there for me, as opposed to the Hitchhiker Guides books, because I could follow them and they were very funny, whereas I don't get me, I like Dirk Gently, but they were just it's like I had told like what sometimes.
I'd love to expand this love fest to the audience here. If folks have their favorite moments from Doctor Who with Douglas Adams or their favorite moments from Hitchhikers or other parts of Douglas's work, I'd love to hear what you guys think about it.
There's somebody online.
There's a comment online that says, the Infocom text adventure is the absolute best version of Hitchhiker's Guide.
Close quotes.
I also have a question myself.
Yeah.
I am not very familiar with DNA's work. However, there's been many times in the life of growing up when you go up and you meet someone and you realize that you both like science fiction, and somebody says, "Oh, you like science fiction? Have you read any of Douglas Adams?" And the other person says, "No." And then the first person says, "Oh, well, then you're not a real sci-fi fan." What would you say to those people?
No, I never have, and that's ridiculous because there's so much science fiction out there. Yeah.
Well, and I think, again, when you hit talent, the folks that can do this well, they make it look so easy, right? Like, you just assume that a person could write good science fiction and good comedy and wrap it all together. It is exceedingly difficult to either be funny or to be a good science fiction writer, right? And I think Douglas Adams really encapsulates those best qualities of both.
Yes.
I mean, how many other television shows, for example, can you think of where you actually have good, solid science fiction and comedy? I can think of one or two, but it's it's on I can count them on my hands.
But-
I don't need a calculator.
But to that point, I don't think there should be a litmus test of who's a science fiction fan, this and that.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're talking about a short canon of works of people who've had influence, I mean, there's J.R.R. Tolkien, and we can debate whether or not it's a good book or even a readable book. But it is one of those cornerstone books which has influenced so many other authors, and it's really sort of hard to navigate the world without knowing his influence. Sort of C.S. Lewis, and then DNA is also part of that. But I'm just going to sort of finish off and actually recommend a very different book. I'm going to recommend A Salmon of a Doubt, which is not a science fiction work. It is his posthumous collection of essays. And you can fob that off to your non-science fiction friends and have them read it. Because it's, once again, excellent comedic, philosophical writing about the world. And it's short. And if you don't like it, you can quickly move on to the next essay. So I will throw that out.
I'd also like to point out the nonfiction book that he wrote called Last Chance to See, which is about endangered species. He and I forget the other guy's name, but he wrote it with a naturalist who took him around the world to see different endangered animals. And I know when I interviewed him back in college, it was actually about that book. And at the time, he said it was his favorite of his books that he'd written. And I know he continued to say that for most of the rest of his life. It really affected him deeply, and it's actually, it's got his humor, it's got his kind of philosophical kind of view of life encapsulated in it too, and it's not strictly, just the quirky science fiction goofiness that he's known for. It shows another side of it too.
I'm going to ask you what you think, and I'm going to butcher this name, but Jan Golfer, the guy who's written, the next novel, for example, in The Hitchhiker's Guide, and have you read it, or what do you think of it if you have?
I haven't read it.
Okay, well, never mind.
All right. We're sort of getting close to the end. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Turn it on. It's not so much a question as a nod to his longevity, that when my daughter was preteen, she actually let me read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to her as like part, every night, a little more, a little more. Have you been able to pass that on to other generations? I mean, she thought it was hysterical, and this was, 2000 or something.
So
I know, just a small anecdote, but I have a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy t-shirt that I found online that I bought last year. And when I wore it around, I just went to Target, nothing fantastic or anything, but I was complimented at random by 5 different teenagers that day on my shirt. So it kind of shows me that he's still, he's still got an audience, which I was really cheered by.
And I'm a big gamer and a big role-playing gamer, especially. I don't do video games much, although I did go through, as they say, Starship Titanic, just because it was Douglas Adams. But frankly, but there's stuff that comes up, and just 42 comes up so often in my circle, right? I mean, it's just hey, 42, and everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. Again, my friends, we're all geeks, but
Hey, you hang around with cool people. Clearly.
we all know that, that means the meaning of life, the universe, and everything, right? And so it just, yeah, there are memes that have come out of his work, and I think, if you had to name one meme that came out of Douglas's work more than anything else, it's 42. Any arguments on that? No? I can't imagine any other meme
Can't argue against
I might
This.
argue.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
All right, don't panic.
Don't
All right,
panic.
I agree. Yes, that's the other one. Yes. Don't panic. Yes.
I might argue the Babel fish.
Or towels, for that matter, I love that story that you told there, Aaron. I wish I could go back in time and actually do that with my daughters. They're teenagers and adults now, so they would probably think it's a little weird that I'm breaking into their room and reading a story to them at night. But man, what a cool story and what a great way to share that. So to me, that's wonderful. My side gig is I'm a science teacher during the day, and so I will oftentimes try to incorporate these pieces in just for the fun of it, for my own amusement. So I teach about the universe, and so there's a unit that I have called Life, the Universe, and Everything, because we talk about chances of alien life with the Drake equation. We talk about galaxies, which of course would be the universe, and we talk about everything else, the Big Bang and beyond. And so every once in a while, a student will say, hey, that sounds familiar, or they'll come up and say, I know where you got that from, or they'll just come up and say, 42. I'm like, yeah. So there are fun ways to kind of like work those things in, and you do see a lot in popular culture. He's had an impact.
Yeah, and like you see, the don't panic,
Yeah.
in friendly letters on the cover, don't panic.
large friendly letters on the cover.
Are there any questions online? Nope. Well, I guess it's
Does
time.
everybody know where their towel is?
Yes.
Only the hoopy froods know where their towels are. If you don't, you're not a hoopy frood.
So I guess it's time for closing thoughts. I think we all agree we lost DNA too early. He died in his mid-40s due
Yes.
to a undiagnosed cardiac event.
Yeah.
It was quite sudden. I wish he had been able to do more stuff.
Definitely.
Like I say, we brought it up over and over again. His work has such amazing humor in it. And his work there are just things about his work that, again, if you read through the books or the radio plays, there are things that come up early on in one, and it'll come back again and back again and back again, and I just love that.
He did die far, far too young. How amazingly lucky are we to have had the chance
What we did have, yeah.
to have him share those talents with the rest of the world. And so to me, I think that's the legacy here, is that all of us have talents that we can share with the world, make the world a better place, make people laugh. And so, yeah, I think that's his greatest legacy, is just the reminder that we all have something positive to share.
Final thought, Chris?
I guess I would just agree with you there. Who's definitely personally an inspiration to me, and I think his whole life was all about not just making jokes, but really trying to expand people's knowledge. And if there was a darkness in his work, it's because he was sometimes very frustrated with how dumb the human race can be, and he wanted us to be better, and he hoped that we would be. In his way, he was a shining light.
Well, thank you, and don't panic.
Don't panic.
Good night, everybody.
Yep. Thanks for joining us, everybody.